True crime is a very, very popular subject, isn't it, at the moment? You can't go anywhere on the net, on radio or television without there being a documentary about a famous, usually murder. And of course, the more murders, the more bloody, the more perverse, then the more fascinated people are. Back in 1983, 1984, of course, in Britain, we were truly shocked about a series of murders that took place in London, and the murderer himself was one Dennis Nilsen, who was known to his friends and work colleagues as Des. He had picked up, taken back to his flat, a number of young men, and most of them did not leave the apartment alive, and most of them did not leave the apartment in one piece because he dismembered most of their bodies. Recently there's been a television dramatisation of the case, the Dennis Nilsen case, and David Tennant, a former doctor in Doctor Who, played the title role, Des. This was the first time we'd really been confronted, I suppose, with a gay murderer who, although he hadn't necessarily murdered gay men, some of them were gay, and we didn't see any of the men he murdered in the television version. We saw a couple of people he might nearly have murdered, but for various reasons they escaped. But we didn't actually see the victims. They weren't dramatised in any way, and people might question why that would be, but I have a feeling that because Des himself pretty much operated on I'm lonely, I'm going to the pub, I'm going to drink myself stupid, and if I meet someone I'll take them back with me. And I think a stuporous, drunken discussion would not have been very interesting dramatically. I might be wrong on this, he may have been quite sober when he brought them back, but drink was very much a part of his modus operandi because he liked to drink, and most of the people that he took back with him he'd met at the pub. So we really focused on three men, two of whom were gay, one of whom was not. The non-gay man was the detective in charge of the case, played by Daniel Mays. And we also had a journalist, a writer named Brian Masters, played by Jason Watkins. And he was fascinated by the crimes and by Dennis Nilsen himself, and he went to see him in prison, and Nilsen authorised him to write a biography, which was something the police didn't initially know about, which caused them some perturbation, because again it was really hiving off what the police should be doing, because the police wanted the answers that maybe Brian Masters was getting from Dennis Nilsen. But of course Dennis Nilsen himself was the central character, and Dennis Nilsen was a very slippery fish indeed. You couldn't quite tell exactly what he was doing, but you could be pretty sure it was manipulation of some kind, manipulating the detectives and manipulating the biographer. At first he appeared to be very open when the policeman said, how many bodies would we find in the environs of the house? He said, oh, about 15. And of course the police had probably never encountered anyone who was so cool and calm about being a mass murderer. But just how many bodies we're still unsure of, because Dennis Nilsen never totally owned up, and certainly never seemed to portray a moment's compassion for either the victims or their families. Now, one of the problems, again a problem of dramatisation, is that some of the victims were really on the bottom rung of society. They'd become estranged from their parents, from their friends, and this, I think, was one of the areas that you could say that Dennis Nilsen, there could have been a motive of kindness. There could have been a shred of compassion, that he did bring them back and he wanted them to feel comfortable, and some of them he took to bed, some of them he didn't. But ultimately, he is a cruel murderer. And I'm afraid that however well the production was executed, and it was very well done. 3 excellent performances, particularly from David Tennant, absolutely frightening, but believably human. He was still a human being. I came away feeling totally depressed. I don't know why. I've seen other true crime episodes. Maybe it was the fact he was a gay man. I don't think so. I think that was almost incidental. I think that when you're looking in the eyes of someone that does not have a conscience for close on 3 hours, it eventually eats away at you. And there is, I think, a soul, isn't there, in us as human beings? I know it's contentious, but this is possibly a man whose soul, for whatever reason, had evaporated or maybe never existed. We didn't really see the other sides of Dennis Nilsen. It was very much focused on his actions, and his actions, which were deadly actions. We didn't really see how he related to his work friends. We didn't see his hobbies or other interests or his political views or anything like that. It was a very one-dimensional view of possibly a multi-dimensional human being. I'm glad I saw it. It's not something I'd ever want to see again. It was very dour, very dowdy, very dreary looking. No bright colours, no real comedy. We did see a little bit of Brian Master's home life with his partner, which was refreshing. I liked that. That was very good. And of course there is another gay murderer, isn't there? Colin Ireland from the 1990s. Maybe we're going to have Colin fairly soon on our screens. But would I recommend it? If you're interested in pathology, definitely. If you're interested in a man who does something very surprising on the first day of his trial, and you begin to wonder what the rest of his actions have been hitherto, given that he behaves in such an outrageous manner. This is an outrageous person who committed outrages against human beings. And that's all I have to say. No tears for Des, I'm afraid, from me.